this shooting that happened almost 2 years ago in Oxford, Michigan is back in the news. And the reason it's back in the news is because they just came out with this big, 500 and some odd page report. I've read a good portion of it. I certainly can't claim to have read it all. But there's a few things that are kind of standing out to me, and two things in particular. Try and hit on them real quickly. One is the report itself. They claim to be this objective third-party thing, and then third-party investigatory body, which they were, rightfully hired by the board, and understandably, they make a few points about how many people throughout the process did not speak to them. They cite some stats. They said there were 161 people who they had on their list of people who either saw the shooter that day, knew the shooter, knew him from the day before, or somehow interacted with him through this entire scenario. And of those 161, they say only 35% of them actually spoke to them. And they're talking about it's hindering their investigation, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I think it's obvious why they didn't want to speak to them, because there are a lot of lawsuits, obviously, flying around out there. But there's one particular spot in this report that makes it very clear why they did not want to speak to them. They're talking about the day before the shooting and how this English teacher in the shooter's first period class noticed that he had was looking at bullets on his phone. And, there's some discrepancy between what she said at one time versus what she told the police. And they kind of make a little bit of deal saying, why is there this discrepancy? There were two teachers in the room. I'd assume maybe it was like an inclusion class or something. So there were two, actual teachers, not an IA, but in two teachers. And one of them said that she was the one who saw him on. They have some type of a computer program where they can monitor what the kids are looking at on their Chromebooks. So the one teacher said she saw it. The other teacher said she saw it on the computer program, the computer security program, which maybe they did. Who knows? And then when she left, she reported what she saw to this PBIS coordinator, restorative practices. I forget her exact title. Restorative practice coordinator type. It's PBIS, that sort of thing. And if you don't know what any of that is, it's a whole different topic. These are behavioral kind of people who help support the kids through various behavior interventions. So she reported it to this person, and then this behavior person then got in touch with the counselor, and then they brought the two down, and they talked to the shooter, the would-be shooter, about what was on his phone and the fact how it was inappropriate, etc. He said at that time, well, he just he went to the range. It's a hobby of theirs. It's and he said, hey, I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry, etc., etc. And then she called home and left a message with the kid's mom, laid the whole message out, which I've never been a big fan of. I've never been a big fan of leaving all the details on the voicemail. You call and say, hey, this is Mr. Huber calling. I need to talk to you about something. Please call me back, and then follow up. But anyway, she called and left a message saying that he was looking at bullets on the phones, inappropriate, et cetera, et cetera. So in the investigation, here's what I'm getting at. In the investigation, they made a big deal about this PBIS coordinator or restorative practice coordinator. Why did she feel the need to get involved in what was she discussing with this child, and why did she bring him down? Was it, and her answer was because it was a cell phone violation. And they were trying to push her and say, well, was it only a cell phone violation? Whereas, or was it because of the content of what he was looking at on his cell phone? She was maintaining it had nothing to do with the content. It was the fact that it was a cell phone violation, and he could have been looking at anything, and I would have done the same thing. And the content, therefore, did not raise it to another level. And they just keep hammering away, saying, well, at this, when she spoke to the police, she said she was concerned about the fact that he was looking at bullets. And now she's trying to say that, well, she wasn't concerned because it was just a cell phone. And they just keep going down that rabbit hole of, was it a cell phone violation or was it not, or was it about the content? This is why they don't want to talk to them, because they are trying to assign blame. Now, in their thing, they in all the introductory information, says they're not there to assign blame. They're talking about responsibility. They kind of draw a distinction between blame versus responsibility. Okay. But this teacher is saying, well, she needs to save her, you know what? Of course she is. Of course she's going to do that. And this is why only 35% of them spoke to them. It's a very, very difficult situation. And then, of course, they come out saying it was preventative, or it was preventable. Of course it was preventable. Everything's preventable. I feel terribly for this counselor and this dean of students. And here's another little piece that often I often think about. Why didn't the counselor and the dean of students had this kid in his office, and it was clear that this kid was presenting a major, the red flags were everywhere. Why didn't they contact the principal? Why didn't they contact an AP, an assistant principal? I have a few ideas. I have a few suspicions. I think maybe this principal or this AP, maybe they weren't approachable. Just my opinion. Why, maybe they were, I have an observation. I have a this, I have a that. I'm a busy man, and maybe they get abrasive, and you have, so my point here is, for administrators, you really got to watch that. Sometimes, you've got a million things going on and you're just going about your business. And sometimes you brush other people off and you don't realize it. Something like this comes along and they don't want to, I didn't want to bother you. I've heard that before, some really serious stuff. And when it comes around the back end, you go, what in the world is going on here? Why didn't anybody tell me? And they go, well, we didn't want to bother you. So I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying it's something to think about. But this report itself, it's interesting to look at. And the other thing, I'll probably do something else on that, and I've already mentioned it in one of my reels. The fact that there was policy in place, but that policy was not being implemented properly, was not being executed. All the right verbiage was out there in those handbooks and in those board policies and everything. It was all there. But the superintendent and the executive assistant superintendents or deputy superintendents, whatever they're called, they were not following through by getting on the principals and the people in the school building to make sure that these things were being implemented. They were there. And they just, we have a policy. Well, policy is good. It's just ain't going to paper. They were not doing anything to implement the policy. And that is apparently what they're trying to say is the major failure. And there were a lot of other things in there. They said they failed to properly communicate this threat assessment policy to the building level administrators. They did not adapt threat assessment administrative guidelines, which would have required training, failed to notify building level administrators of the existence of a form. They had a form on their website for reporting things. When I was in the school system, we used to have, like the bully prevention form, and then there was the threat assessment form. There's a million forms, but apparently they didn't tell anybody, or they didn't emphasize or even tell the building level administrators. They failed to ensure the district's suicide prevention guidelines were updated. So there's a lot of these failures that they listed between the executive level of the administration or of the superintendent's office, the executive level, the superintendent himself, the executive assistant superintendents, between them And the building level, there was a big disconnect, and they didn't do it. And part of the reason, I'm sure, is because they were all wrapped up in looking at the data and and trying to make sure that their student achievement scores are where they need to be. Which I'm not making excuses, but it's a vicious cycle out there. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of bring up I'm probably not going to have too much more to say about this. If I do, I'll probably do it in one of those little short reels. But this is what the report is saying. They're making a big deal that people are not talking to them. I think it's obvious why people are not talking to them. That was just one example that I gave you. There's a million more. So anyway, my message is very clear: is that as an administrator at any level, man, you've got to be on top of it. You've got to be. This kind of incident goes on every day in these large school systems. Every day there are kids being brought to the office who are showing signs, who are looking at inappropriate things on their phone, who are making comments, who are submitting work in English class, or there's drawings in art or other classes, drawings on their binder that are inappropriate, that are concerning. It's concerning. They are sent all the time. This happens all the time, and you just have to sort through it diligently, and you have to take appropriate action. I think in this case, it was very clear that there was some serious thing. If and my last point is this: if this counselor and dean of students, if they believed it to be that significant to tell the parent that you need to take this kid home and you need to have them immediately evaluated from a mental health standpoint, if it was that important, how can it not be enough? How can it not be important enough to go talk to a building administrator, say, hey, we've got a problem here? That's what those people are there for. So I wish them the best. It's certainly not their fault. I can tell you that, but you really got to watch what you're doing. Anyway, I hope this helps. So thanks. Have a great day.